My name is Nathan Helgren, and I'm a Senior Program Manager at Microsoft. I work with Dataverse, and also I've been working with the Access team for Access migration. What I would like to be talking about today is the pro developer capabilities for Power Apps and Dataverse in regards to Microsoft Access development. Now, the contents in this slide deck that I'm going to be covering apply across the board for Power Apps and Dataverse, but it is meant as an introduction to folks who may not be super familiar with the content. So some of this may be a review for some of you, but there will be some demos and other content. So in my agenda today, we are going to be talking about, is Dataverse really just no-code, low-code? I'm going to go over some of our pro development capabilities. I'll be giving you a demonstration of solutions and how to use them. We'll be talking about some more of our other features like APIs and SDKs. Then I'll demo virtual tables, which allow for data virtualization from other external sources from Dataverse, and finish up with a few other pro dev functionality discussions. So, the question I am asked very often when talking with Access developers who are considering to migrate to Dataverse is Dataverse just low code, no code? Because as an Access developer, I have a lot of control in my environments, and I want to be able to maintain that sort of control and that level of pro development. And the answer is no. Dataverse is often mentioned as a low-code, no-code platform because it does make development easier for citizen developers. However, Dataverse has a number of pro developer functionality that makes it much easier for developers to step in, do pro development, and deliver high-class solutions. Some of the features that we have built into Dataverse actually make the pro dev experience easier than if you're starting from scratch. Additionally, in this slide deck, we have a link to some online guidance which discusses all of our pro dev options for Dataverse and the Power Platform. You can access this information from our online documentation and read a great amount of detail about each one of these subjects that I'm going to be discussing. So what can developers do within Dataverse? Dataverse has a lot of different capabilities that allow developers to explore how they want to interact with their data and how they want to interact with apps and also external sources of data and other functions. A few of the items we're going to be talking about today is number one, solution management. And solution management is our ALM or application lifecycle management functionality that allows you to have dev, test, and production environments and move your content from one to another, or to easily take a production application and deploy it across multiple different environments. We'll be talking a little bit about our web APIs and SDKs, which are provided natively by Dataverse and eliminates the needs for developers to build their own APIs before they can start working with the content. We'll talk a bit about the organization and discovery services, which provide additional features to make the ability to give commands and messages and also find available environments much easier. We'll be spending a little bit more time on virtual tables, which allows you to virtualize data from other sources like SQL and make it look and behave like it's part of Dataverse and use them within the Power Platform. And then from there, we'll talk about plugins, Azure integrations, SQL Server Management Studio implementations, some workflow extensions, and other features. First, I'm going to talk about solution management, or ALM. Dataverse provides a built-in native way to handle your application lifecycle and provides you the ability to build solutions. And solutions are packages of your work, which will include your apps, plugins, and other features that you need to make your applications work, and put them into a single package that you can move from one environment to the other, from, say, development to test, or once you're in production, you can say, I'm deploying it to production A, production B, production C, and that application will be able to be moved from each one of those environments. It also allows you to have some level of security, because once you deploy this, you can set solutions to be managed solutions, which means that the core content of that solution cannot be changed by anyone except for the publishing organization. So if you deploy this into a customer's environment, the customer will not be able to modify any of the content that you've deployed. They can add to it, but they can't delete or remove things. And also, it helps us manage our chain of deployment to make sure that we have the most recent versions on the environments we need to have. So I'm going to take a moment now and walk through a demonstration of how to use the solution functionality in order to deploy apps. Here I am in a Power Apps environment using the Maker portal. And within the Maker portal, if you have solutions that are in place, you can select solutions and it will show you any solution you have installed. At this particular environment, I have a solution that I've already built for this demonstration, and it has an app built into it. If I go to my apps, I can choose this sample app and it's very basic. It allows me to view records. I can add new records here. And you'll see I don't really have any other data available. I can submit the record, and when it's done, I can view that record. And again, there's not very much data here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my other dev environment, and I'm going to import a solution that's going to have an updated version of this app, and you'll be able to see that the application, once imported, works just as it does in the dev environment. So here's my development environment. As you can see, my environment changed. And what I'm going to do is go to Solutions. I'm going to show you, I've already built a solution here to save some time because it does take a little bit of time to build the solution. But my app that I'm changing, if I open up this app, you'll see there's a difference. Because if I go here, I have a different dropdown. So I have the name field, and then I also have this lookup dropdown that's pulling additional data in from Azure Active Directory. So what I want to do is I want to take this app and I want to deploy it to the environment I want to move to. So to create a solution, it's very simple, and I'll walk you through the process now. You click New Solution, and you have to give it a name. And then you select the publisher. The publisher is built by default for each environment, and it allows you to have the ability to determine who is the owner of this solution so that others cannot modify your solution. I'm just going to pick the default, and you'll notice it defaults to version 1.0 when you first make it. Then I click Create, and it will create in a few moments a brand new solution that is available in the environment. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. It'll create a brand new solution in the environment, you'll see here, and at this moment, it's empty because I haven't placed anything inside this solution. So now that we have an empty solution, I can start adding anything I want to it. So I can either go to New and start building new content into the solution, but I'm going to go to Add Existing. And I know I have an app I've already built. So I'm going to say, I want to add my Canvas app. And here's my app. I can click Add, and it's going to add that to my solution. And it takes a few moments for it to add into the solution and make sure that it creates dynamic links to all of the content so that it will survive migrating from dev to test or to other environments. And once that's present, I can actually select the item that I put in the app, and I can say, I want to include the dependencies. And so from here, I can say, oh, what dependencies does this particular solution have? And I see I've got 2 additional tables that I have to include. So I can choose to actually include my dependencies or my required objects. And as I add them, the system will detect which objects have to be present in order for this to work, and it will add them. Now, right now, it doesn't work in a cascading manner. So in the example you saw before, my sample table has a relationship to the AAD table. So it brought in the sample table. But if I go to sample, I can also add the required objects for the sample table, which will bring in the additional table. Now, once you're all finished with this, you have to just publish it. And publishing the solution makes it available for you to use and export. I've already done this. And the reason I'm skipping ahead is it takes a few moments to generate the solution because it has to do a lot of work to make sure all of the linkage and all the content is working. So here's my follow-up. So here's the solution that we originally had in our secondary test environment. And you can see I have my apps and my content. And then I have my patch solution. And my patch solution is used to add a new layer on top of the existing solution. So if I go back to my list of solutions here, I just want to note that, so here we have the name, which is demo, and then it adds patch if you make a patch. If you want to make a patch, you just click on an existing solution and then select clone and clone a patch that builds a clone of the existing solution. So since I already have this built, I'm going to switch over to my environment where I have my app, and here's my original solution. All right, so I'm going to import my solution, which has been downloaded to my system. So here's my new solution. I tell it to open. I click Next. And now we'll go through the process of importing the solution. Once the solution is imported, it will give me information that it has been completed, and then you'll be able to see the update on the app that we'd seen before. As you see up here at the top, it tells us that we're currently importing the solution. It'll take a few moments, and it'll give us a message when it's completed. So the benefit of using this functionality is that now that I have a solution built, I can make sure that I can deploy this to places, I can lock this down, that when I deploy it to users, for example, if I'm an ISV and I deploy it to the company that has contracted me, I know that my solution is present in their system. It's the exact solution that I've created and deployed. And if it's a managed layer, I know that the customer hasn't been able to manage or change any of the functionality that's inside the solution itself. Makes it easier for troubleshooting and for maintaining the integrity of the content once you provide it. And upon deployment, it's a fully functional version. The one thing that solutions do not do is deploy data. It will deploy all of your schema and your apps and everything else you select, and it'll put that data over there. But in the case of a dev to test switch, you don't want to move your data over. You want to have a clean environment that you're placing it in that has the content but not the data. If you do want to import data after you move a solution over, you will have to do a data export and import, which is a different function. And now, as you can see, at the top of the screen, we have a message that's saying our solution has imported successfully. And you'll see here is my solution that has the patch. It's been deployed. And now if I go to my app, all I have to do is open my app. And as it opens, I click the button, and now you can see this app includes my drop-down list that it didn't have before. So the app has been input into the additional system, and the app has been updated with all the content I've had before. I didn't have to do any changes in my test environment to get that change in. I just imported my changes from dev into test, and my app is updated. Okay, now I'm going to change back to the slide deck, and we're going to talk about a few other items. Out-of-box APIs and SDKs are a great feature that Dataverse provides to developers. The bonus here is that almost every one of our operations that we have include out-of-the-box APIs that developers can look up the details online and use immediately. They can do just about anything with their data for any one of our controls or requests or functions by just using these APIs. Usually a developer, if you were working off of SQL, would have to go and build an API to do what they want it to do before they could even go into the steps of building the app or the additional plugins or other things they wanted to use. So this is a very handy feature that expedites the functionality. So we have things such as the operations to do the CRUD operations on tables. We have the ability for users to do system actions. We have the ability for handling authentication, all built natively, available to you with all the instructions available online. Next, we have the Organization and Discovery service. The Organization service is a definition of all the available messaging that's available for our operations. And again, fully available and documented online, so it's very easy for you to understand all of the messaging operations that are available to you, and you can find that information and make use of it immediately. The Discovery service is an additional function that's very handy because it allows you to, using the user's ID, make a request and find every single environment that that user has access to. It's very useful in cases where you want to allow users to move data from one location to the other, or when a user logs in, you want them to select an environment that you want them to work from, and it will pull anything that's related to the user's AAD login. So this is a very handy feature that speeds up that development process as well. Next, we have virtual tables. And this is something that's going to be most interesting to people who are coming in from Access or from people who have data stored in other sources. When you come to Dataverse, 99.9% of the time you have data that lives somewhere else. You're not just starting with Dataverse. One option is you take your data and you move it into Dataverse. Another option may be, I have SQL, I have a large amount of data, I have many clients that are invested and connected to that SQL server, but I want to build an app on it. I want to use automated flows. I want to do a Power Virtual Agent. So what do? Instead of having to move that data into Dataverse and do the processing to make that possible, you can use what's called a virtual table. And a virtual table allows you to build a table that looks and acts just like a Dataverse table, but the data lives somewhere else. So in this case, we're going to be demonstrating SQL Server, but you can do this connection with Excel, with SharePoint, and with other external sources. We have some of these functionalities built in that allow you to do this in a quick, easy way. There's also custom functionality where if you don't have a connector available that you would like to use and you don't see it in our list, you can build a custom connector to anything. In that case, you will have to write some API plugins to be able to talk between the two systems. But we do have one capability which makes it easier if you're connecting to known systems that Microsoft is very familiar with and that we own the authorization for. So now that I've talked a little bit about what virtual tables can do, I want to talk about the components of a virtual table. This is important because it's going to help us go through the process of setting this up. So virtual table configuration has a number of pieces that have to be set up in order for a virtual table to work. So first off, you have your data source, and in this case, that will be SQL. Once you have SQL as your data source, you're going to have to set up a data provider. And this data provider defines the behavior of the virtual table. It explains how the APIs from Dataverse are going to work with the APIs for SQL. We have some connectors that are pre-built for you that have this defined, or you can define your own. Then we have the connection, and the connection sets up the ability to connect from Dataverse to the source of data. And then, of course, we have the connection reference. And the connection reference allows the Dataverse APIs and the Power Apps to talk to all of this downstream system. As we go through the next couple of steps in the demo, you're going to see how we create each one of these features for us to be able to talk easily between Dataverse and SQL and use your data. So now I'm going to do a quick demonstration of virtual table creation and how you're able to access your data and use those in Power Apps. So here I am in a Dataverse environment. And this Dataverse environment exists in and of itself, but I have data in SQL, and I want that SQL data to be part of my apps. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is under data, I'm going to have to build a connection. And this connection is going to allow me to connect to a data source. Now, if you already have a connection that exists, you can select it and you can move forward, and you don't have to actually build a new one. In this case, I'm going to show you how to build a new one. So you'd click New Connection, and then from here, I'm going to select SQL Server because that's where my data is. SQL Server is going to ask me to authenticate, and so I'm going to choose SQL Server Authentication, and then I'm going to have to add in my authentication details. Now, as I enter in my SQL Server information, it's going to ask me for my server name, the database that I want to connect to on SQL. I'm going to have to provide login credentials, and this could be an individual user's credentials or a system account. And if you're using a non-cloud version of SQL, you'll have to provide the gateway that allows you to attach to the SQL database as well. Now that I've filled in all this information, I'll click Create. And the system is going to take just a moment to create my connection. So this handles the first part of creating a virtual table, which is we've built the connection, provided the account information to connect to SQL. Now that this connection is created, I want you to know that we're using a SQL connection. And that SQL connection is something that we're able to understand in Dataverse, which means that you don't have to build your API plugins. And there's a lot of other background content that you don't have to create, that you would have to create if you were doing a custom plugin. So this process is using our virtual connector provider for SQL, which takes away a lot of those steps and automates a lot of this. And so from here, my next step is to build myself a connection reference. The connection references are going to be built inside of a solution. So I've created a solution here called Build Demo. And Build Demo I created specifically for this purpose, for us to build this connector. So I can just open this up and you'll see that I don't have anything in here yet. So for my connection to work between Dataverse and SQL, I have to build what's called a connection reference now, which lets Dataverse talk to the connection. So I'll start here by clicking New, and under More, you have an option to create a connection reference. The connection reference is what Dataverse is going to use to speak to SQL. So I'm just going to name this Build Connection Reference. And then next, I'm going to choose a connector. So I know I'm using SQL. And after I choose SQL, I've got a drop down here that lists all of my connections that I can use to connect to. So the bottom one is the one I just most recently connected to. Typically, you're going to have connections that don't all have the same name, but this was for a previous step. So I wanted to make sure that you're aware that you will have different names for each connection here. So I'll click the connection I want to use, and I'll click Create. This should only take just a moment. And once this reference is created, you'll see it appear. And now Dataverse is able to connect to the connection that we built for SQL. Now there's one more step I have to take, which is to build the virtual table now. So now to create the virtual table, I'm going to have to first start by clicking on the settings gear, and then I'm going to have to click on advanced settings, and that will take me to the page that I need to be in the admin portal to set up the virtual table. And here we are at the admin portal, and from here, I want to go to settings and change this to administration. And inside administration, you can see that we have a virtual entity data source. So I will click on that list. And from here, I want to create a new data source. And this is what's going to allow me to use the virtual table. So I click New. And when I come in here, it's going to say what type of data provider am I going to use. I'm using the virtual connector data provider. This is the one that I mentioned that is special to SQL usage. And click OK. And then from here, it's going to ask me to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Build virtual table demo. And then from here, it's going to ask me to fill in a number of fields. So when I have to fill out this form, right now I have to put in a lot of information that's part of the setup for the application to allow us to have authentication. By the time that build actually arrives, you will not have to provide this level of information. You'll just have to provide your connection reference as part of the link. So I skipped through the portion where I filled in the data here, but what you will still have to do is give it a name and then go to your connection reference. So by clicking on the drop-down list, I can see my build connection reference that I just built, and I can select that. And then I'm going to save. And once that's saved, now I can move over to Dataverse again. Now I'm back over to Power Apps and Dataverse, and I'm going to leave the solution section, and now I'm going to go into my data and tables section. When I go to the tables, now I have a virtual table that's beginning to be set up. I have what's called an entity catalog created. So I've built the connection, and I told it I want virtual tables. So what will happen is inside your tables list, I will have an entity catalog. So here's the entity catalog, and the entity catalog provides us a list of all the tables that are eligible to participate in a virtual table. So if I click data here, it's going to come back, and this is a list of every single table on our SQL Server that we can use in order to build an app. In this case, I'm going to pick on the customer table, and then from here, I will click Edit Record. By editing the record, I'm actually telling it to build the virtual table. When this comes up, there's a few brief things we have to do. Okay, and so here's our customer table we're going to create after we selected Edit on the form. I have to go to Create or Refresh Entity and change this to Yes to build my virtual entity. And then I pick what I want my primary field to be. So I'm going to pick last name. And then save and close. Once this saves, I will now be able to go back to my tables list, and the virtual table will be there. And you will be able to see all the data, and you'll be able to use that data as part of an app. So once this is created, I can go back to my tables. And I will refresh my table. It may take a moment for this to show up after it's been created. And here we have a virtual table for customer. If I click on this, and I go to my data, it will return the data that is in my SQL Server. I'll be able to see it. So here we have the data. I can go to View All Columns. And I can easily see that now my SQL table data is here. It's in Dataverse. It thinks it's a Dataverse table. And now this table can be part of relationships, lookups, built-in apps, and any other functions you want to use as part of Dataverse. Now, let's go finish up a couple other topics. Plugins are another functionality that you can use as a developer that allows you to build assemblies that will take specific actions. These actions can happen before or after a transaction happens within the system. So for example, if you do have a query built, you can build a plugin that actually has a filter built into your query statement before it gets sent to the server to do additional filtering before it's sent and return back a subset of values. Other things you can do with plugins, as mentioned before with the virtual tables, is you can build a plugin that translates between a Dataverse API and an API in another system like SQL and allows the two of them to talk together. This allows you to have a lot of flexibility in what you do with your data and how you interact with data in between the actual selection of processes and the operations executing. There's a lot of rich Azure integration that's possible because we are built on Azure. And so that allows you to have the full suite of Azure capabilities as well. You're able to utilize your webhooks that you can use to integrate with external services and execute your custom code. Event hubs allow you to publish and subscribe to services that process all of the transactions that are happening and have other events occur once those events are detected. You can synchronize your data between Dataverse and external systems, and you can export your data to the data lake using Azure Synapse as well. So if you want to do backups of your data and place it in the data lake as well, that can be done. Another new feature we have is SQL Server Management Studio integration. So Dataverse has its own ability to query and find data, but if you're more used to using SQL querying, you can use the SQL Server Management Studio to build queries for your data and pull the information out. It's read-only as a query, so you're not able to do any CRUD or any CUD operations on it, but you are able to do very specific queries in language that you're used to dive in deeper and get very specific results that you would like to have. You can also use CodeActivity Class to extend the workflow extensions that are available to you. So Dataverse data can be part of workflows and automated processes that help modernize your business. And there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize the code to take custom actions that are not provided by Microsoft. So you could have actions that aren't part of our set of actions and build your own and do something different outside of what we give you, but still have that work natively within Dataverse and automate flows. So .NET code can be used to create customizations, visualizations, controls to do different things with your data, and then that can be surfaced through Power Apps. And so that way, if you want to have a specific type of control to view or display or modify your data, you can build your own and do not use the out-of-the-box functions, but have something that's custom to your specific company's needs. So this concludes my overview of the Power Apps and Dataverse Pro Developer opportunities that Access developers can take advantage of. Please take a moment to learn more about all of these functionalities. I provided you a high-level view, but there are a large number of documents and samples and information available in our online documentation that can help you get used to this functionality and learn more and make it your own. Thank you.